So you saw Spear and you saw Goering testify. Any of the other defendants that you remember testifying?
No, they were all forceful. None of them admitted anything. I imagine their attorneys had pretty well advised that they were just taking the orders, They acquitted two. Well, while we're on it, Goering took the poison pill the night of the hanging. And
what do you know about that story? Do you have some information about that?
Well, I know this because my buddy from Cross Lake, my buddy...
Norman or Norbert?
No,
oh.
The guard. I'm going to see him next week. Jerry Bo. He was in the jail area at the time that somebody discovered that Goering was dead in his bunk. He hadn't turned... If they were facing the wall, the guards that were watching, if you look at them here, they had people in there, people to watch them all day, every while they were there. And if they faced the wall when they were asleep, they had along like a fishbowl. They'd go in there and poke them. Mm-hmm. You want to make sure that they're looking at you. Well, they noticed he wasn't turning over. And so he had taken the pill, coward. And so Griffrath, the Norbert, was called on to hold part. What, you got a gurney or that you carry with?
This is your friend from Cross Lake, Jerry.
Yeah. And he, Jerry Bow, carried one. He carried Goering out of there, and they asked him. He was called on to talk about that. And the one thing that I remember was that they asked him, "Well, where did you place General Goering or whatever it was?" We threw him off the edge of the second deck into the dump truck. That isn't what was officially said, but it's what he saw. They threw him out of that gurney or the stretcher into the dump truck.
So that was how they moved the body, is what you're saying?
I don't know. They said they all had funerals, but I don't know if they did. Maybe you'd know more about it.
Well, actually, it's funny. I just read something about that. They took the men that were executed. They took the bodies to Dachau, and the last time they ever used the crematorium at Dachau was to what's the word I'm looking for? Cremate them. Thank you. They cremated them at Dachau, and they took and scattered their ashes because they didn't want any of the bodies to be buried and become shrines to these war criminals. So that's what they did, and then they just destroyed, but this. Never, of course, used the crematoria again at Dachau.
They didn't cremate very many at Dachau. But I don't know if they brought him back to Dachau. Is that where they were buried?
That's where they cremated all the
that crematorium at Dachau was seldom used.
That's what I just read the other day. I'm assuming it's the case.
It might have been cremated at another camp. They learned how to do this Saigon B. Prior to that time, they were killing Jews with portable vans driving around and gathering them and put them in ghettos. And then they were killing them, but they weren't killing them fast enough. In January of '42, there was a meeting that held in Berlin, and I got pictures that show
Wannsee conference.
Huh?
Wannsee was the name of the conference.
Forget who it was that whose facilities it was. It seems to me Goering had something to do with the suburb of the building that they were in, and made this decision. We'll vote. Who feels that they should be that they should suffer the death? And those that had been there and made the decisions, those were some of those that had to be stand duty for trial, because they had used this as part of the reason that they should die.
How did Goering have access to the cyanide capsule?
We never know.
Oh, okay.
Some think that they accused the guards, and the guards claimed up and down that they hadn't. Some think he brought it in his shoe when he came in. I don't know. I don't think we ever found out.
I heard somebody once said he might have had a scab And then he put it underneath the scab.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Or someone said maybe his tooth. You know, there's different theories.
But wouldn't that show up on an X-ray?
Yeah, who knows? I don't know. These are just theories that I've heard.
Of course, they weren't X-raying him all the time, so I don't know. But he got it somewhere.
How did you connect with Mr. Bow? Because he must be about roughly your age, I bet.
Yeah, same age. Well, that
Okay.
was just happened within this last year.
Okay.
Jerry called me, and he had gotten some information that I was holding these meetings. I never knew him before, and he'd like to join in on it. And so I went down there, and I don't drive much anymore. I usually have somebody driving for me. And we met with Jerry and his wife, and she's very active in this, Grace. So we got what we call now the Jerry and Larry show. I tell my story, and then Jerry, he tells his story about the trials. I mean, about the guards.
In a summary, what is it that you like to tell people without? I know you have it on DVD, so we can watch it all on DVD.
What's
what? What is it that you? In a summary, what is it that you would like to teach people about this time period?
Well, what do we want? You know, it took 12 months of trial. Well,
here's a better way of that. When you go out and teach, when you teach your courses, when you give your talks.
I'm talking.
Yeah. What is it that you like to talk about?
Well, I feel this is the part that has to be understood.
Okay.
That these men that were responsible for these concentration camps and putting the 6 million in there of the Jews, men, women, children, many of them died that way, gas or starvation. They were inhumane. I went to bed crying. I mean, just a kid, and then you'd hear these things that were told, and you'd look at them, and they were all just like businessmen. You'd think it was the Businessmen's Association meeting. They all dressed pretty well. There was some ribbon uniforms, but all the ribbons and patches were gone. Goering always carried his uniform on, but he had no insignias. They were so indoctrinated by Hitler. I use this as a phrase, and that is that one man taught hate. One man taught hate, and 6 million Jews died. And he taught that hate to those officials, and they hated it. And there's a lot of hate. And why is there hate? You can't be a Christian or Jew and practice your religion and hate. But it took me a long time to get rid of it.
Did you have hatred towards Germans after you learned what you learned? And
I can't categorize every one of them that way, you know, but that was all that I learned. We didn't mingle with the Germans very much at all.
Has that changed over time?
Sure it did. It changed over time. The mingling, the soldiers weren't supposed to, the fraternizing or even going to German homes, we weren't supposed to do that.
How about your attitudes towards Germans? Has that changed?
Oh yeah, I know a lot of Germans. I can't honestly say that I know Nazis. I think I did for a while right after the war. I think that there were some of them were Nazis yet.
What do you hope to accomplish through your teaching or the talks that you give?
Well, I feel this. I feel it has to be told. If the schools aren't teaching it, where are these kids going to learn it? If they don't, and the parents weren't there, so it's all hearsay. I remember a conversation that I had, I forget which one of the places I was talking at, and he said, well, how do you confront people that say that they didn't, this isn't true?